Okay, folks, so our plan all along was for you to think that this was a workroom, and now that you're in the middle of your work, we can get started, and the churn rate will be lower. So we are going to get started now, and it's always fun presenting or having a session in the lunchroom after the food is gone. It's always interesting to see how it'll work out. My name is Ahmed Abbasi. I am the director for the Center for Business Analytics in the McIntire School of Commerce, where I wear many different analytics-related hats. I am also an affiliate faculty member with the former Data Science Institute, and of course now we are on the heels of some really exciting developments here at UVA with the School of Data Science. I'd like to begin by introducing our panelists and then having them do the deeper introduction. So we're lucky to have Rajkumar Venkatesan, who is a chaired professor of all things awesome at Darden. And we're also joined by Jade Kim, who is a consultant at Analytic Partners, and she's also a proud UVA alum. And finally, Kristen Moody, who is Associate Vice President at Analytic Partners, and who has supported various analytics initiatives and data science initiatives at UVA for many years. So let's start with a quick round of applause for our panel. All right. And then panelists, if you could each just do a little bit briefer, a little bit more in-depth, I should say, not briefer, that would not be good, introduction of yourselves. Raj, we'll start with you. Okay,
so hi everyone, glad to be here. I teach marketing at the Darden School, and I also lead the MBA MSDS dual degree program, one of the collaborations that the School of Data Science has with the Darden School. In terms of research, I work on how AI and analytics affects marketing, and what is the strategic mindset and people, process, culture topics and that marketers need to consider when they incorporate AI into marketing.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade. I'm a consultant at Analytic Partners. Been there for about 4.5 years now. I've worked across a variety of industries like CPG, hospitality, et cetera, so have some experience there. I graduated from McIntire undergrad in 2015. And have continued to stay around the area. And we, as a company, are pretty involved in recruiting and staying in the loop with students in the community. So we're really excited to be here today.
And I'm Kristen Moody. I'm an AVP with Analytic Partners. I've been there for a while, a little over 15 years. And prior to that, I was actually a chemistry major at University of Richmond. Any spiders in the crowd? No spiders? And so my first job was actually in product development, making body wash and bar soaps, actually. But found my way gravitating more and more towards big data and found myself here at Analytic Partners, where we do a lot of marketing and business analytics.
Great. So we're lucky to have such a wealth of knowledge here. And so, as you guys can see on the back here, it says data and business analytics. And really, what we're here to talk about is this term, business data science, right? What does that intersection look like of the Venn diagram between business and the data science? And so, Raj, given that you are literally leading these programs that are looking at this type of an intersection, how would you define this? How would you define business data science?
Sure. So, the way we look at the MBA MSDS program is we look at it from the side of what is the graduate going to do and what is going to be their role in firms. And what we find is for firms, the need they have is what is called the T, which is breadth of business understanding and depth of data science. So that is kind of the role that we look at, and that's how we look at data science, is that in businesses, you need to know all the different functions of business, but also need to know the depth of data science. So one example I can give is, like in Unilever, one of the ways they include data science is all the reports are automated now. So the financial projections, the sales forecast, that is automated. And so that's one example of data science in business, right? And then their sales planning, which is what promotions they run for Dow Soap in Walmart or Target. That's all quantitative. That's all based on knowing which SKU sells where and how much to discount. And then the third thing which they're doing is for promotion of products, that is online, right? So they need to know first-party data, and one data which is interesting is they have the data with people's consent for more than a third of the population. For example, in Thailand, they have that's one of their, so because they don't go online directly, they have to get people to give data. With that, they can launch things like 7th generation directly on a one-on-one personalized level. So you're looking at efficiency of operations in the supply chain, you're looking at Internet of Things with predictive maintenance, and you're looking at personalized marketing. So these would be, in my mind, the three main areas where business and data science intersect.
Interesting. So thank you for that definition. And so really the goal for this panel is to, as we've talked about defining this business data science space, to think about what are those research and industry and pedagogical activities and points of collaboration, and how a school of data science can fit into that, right? So that's kind of the goal for today. And so what we're going to do is I have a set of additional questions prepared for our panelists that we'll begin with for the next maybe 20 minutes or so. And after that, we'll try to open it up for hopefully an interactive audience discussion. And those of you that have already prompted with the easy questions, please make sure you're ready to go with those. Okay. All right, so now that we've talked about kind of what business data science is, and I think this question is for all three of our panelists, really, what do you see as some of the most interesting and important trends in the business data science space? And Kristen, perhaps we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of trends. I think overall data science is so rapidly evolving and changing on a hourly basis. One of the important things is just continue to try and keep up, right? To keep your finger on the pulse. I mean, again, I've been with Analytic Partners for 16 plus years, and the pace has picked up so rapidly, and I would say just in the past, certainly the past year, but really started maybe 3 or 4 years ago as well. So just the pace of data and the size of the data is continuing to just grow exponentially. The different types of methodologies that you can apply, the robust analytics that you can apply is continuing to change, and there's lots of different methodologies out there that you have to be cautious of in terms of their applications, and we can get into that a little bit, but I'll leave that there for right now.
So from another angle, I think the education is a big shift in the industry. So not too long ago, there were no real formalized programs around data science, especially as it relates to business applications. And now the Data Science Institute is a great example of a more recent initiative, but something that is so needed. And I think that trend is really interesting as it applies to us as kind of leaders in the space, even from a corporate perspective, because the onus kind of falls to us to collaborate with academia and determine what do we want to get out of these programs, what do people need to know, and how can we translate that to a business environment. So I think that's something that is continuing to develop, and something that is more important for us to be, taking an active involvement in.
So the way we look at trends that are happening now is, let's step back and also look at why things are happening now, right? If you want to know whether this is a hype or real, you need to understand what are the causes and why these things happen. So one of the, there are three things in our mind that is determining this growth in data science in business. One is technology has rapidly progressed. You have computing power that is growing tremendously. And the second factor is people are connected with each other. Consumers, employees, the suppliers. There is ways for us to connect with each other, maybe if it's consumers on Instagram or Facebook, if it is individuals, employees, it's on LinkedIn, we connect with each other, right? And the third one is all of this is creating data that is now available to be mined, right? So all the connections and the technology and the data availability because of these things, these three combined is coming together. And that combination is what is allowing some of this growth to happen. In terms of actual fundamental data science or the algorithms, most of it has been there for a while. Now what is happening is the scale at which you can do things is much higher.
Interesting. So we've just kind of heard about this convergence of many different things, the confluence of factors, the data, the technologies, and whatnot. And it looks like there's also the education aspect, which is trying to keep pace with this changing environment. And so kind of flipping the coin a little bit, as we think about the challenges side, I'm wondering if you guys could speak a little bit to what are the potential pitfalls associated with this. And Raj, maybe we'll start with you on that too.
So the pitfall comes back to data.
Yep, 100%.
Clean data. We say there is a lot of data, and we're going to say how much of it is actually useful and clean. And a lot of it is, I think the education part, we're getting there in terms of like people's awareness and willingness to work with it has really shifted.
Objectively speaking, absolutely. We're not just getting there, we are crushing it. Wouldn't you agree? Yes.
Well, I'm in marketing, so we are like, we tend to be slow on the numbers. But it is like, for example, if you're a company that is built on acquisitions, your data sets don't talk to each other easily because you've had different data sets with different schemas, and then now if you're bringing that all in together, you first have to lay the pipelines to make these data connect so that you have a full view of the customer, full view of the processes that are happening. I think just that, if we get that right, the rest of it can happen. So the foundation layer itself is a challenge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the data, there's a lot of it out there. There continues to be a lot more, but the disruption around the data is inevitable, and that's really the big challenge these days, is that, there's tons of walled gardens out there where you cannot connect the customer. If you want to try to trace a customer's pathway from seeing a TV ad to seeing a Facebook ad to doing a Google search to actually buying on Amazon, you can't connect those away. You can't connect those consumers together because everybody's got their own data and they're not sharing it. So while data has continued to grow and get bigger and has been tracked more, there's actually been less robustness in what you can do with it when you try to connect it all together. So when you're trying to look at your business holistically, you really have to take a step up from the customer level to be able to get to that view where you piece things together, because you can't currently do that at a customer level given all the privacy acts. You've got your California Privacy Acts and GDPR out there that's really disrupting the space and data.
Yeah, and on top of that, we have clients coming to us asking very detailed questions about their customer, hearing about multi-touch attribution, hearing all the buzz around that, and then as we try to help them with these questions and kind of pull it back a little bit, there's the challenge of, how do we answer their question with the issues of the data that exists? So kind of finding that middle ground from a client and consulting perspective as well.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Debunking the myths that are out there. It's challenge.
And so earlier, Raj, you talked about how your interests are shifting towards not just marketing, but marketing and AI, right? And so we know that AI and machine learning have become these sort of household words that we use. I'm curious that you've worked for a long time in the marketing analytics space. How are AI and machine learning shaping or reshaping marketing analytics?
Sure. So the main thing is that you're looking at personalization at scale, right? That is the biggest shift when you talk about marketing and AI, from where marketing was before to now. So each individual customer is approached with offers, and you're having a communication with each individual customer in a personalized way. Right? So if I'll give you an example, is Chase is now moving all its digital ads to be written by machines. Not placed, written by machines. Right? So this is where it gets to, like, the creative part of marketing is now gone into machines. And they're doing it because they feel that they've lost the personal touch with the consumers, with the banks not people not going to the banks and talking to the teller, they're not able to get a personal connection with the consumers. So ironically, to create personal connection with every individual customer, you need machines, because you cannot have enough people to actually do that personalization. But a machine that understands emotions and how words act on consumers' emotions can know based on like the consumer that is coming, based on cookie data or any other kind of data, or the website the consumer is seeing the ad. Based on all of that, you can determine what kind of ad or what message to give to the consumer, right? So that's machine driven. So this is kind of like what I mean as personalization at scale.
Fascinating. So kind of building on this idea, we know we just talked about AI and machine learning, and one of my favorite topics these days to write about is, which some of the sessions have touched upon today, is AutoML, right? Raise your hand if you've heard about AutoML, automated machine learning. All right, so some of you have heard about it. Those of you that have not, or if you have cramps in your arm, basically it is the use of machine learning to generate better machine learning, right? So think about, it's like automation 2.0. We were used to think about how data scientists can automate the business process, right? And now we're thinking about how can we automate the data scientist? Obviously a very important topic for a school for data science. And so the idea, which is being pushed heavily by the Googles and Microsofts, is that for many well-defined prediction tasks, we can commoditize the process, right? And please do check out my HBR article that's already been out on this. That was a personal plug. But what I wanted to focus on with AutoML concept is it's really fascinating, especially we happen to have a couple of seasoned consultants here who are from a firm that prides itself on high-touch, personalized solutions, right? And so, Kristen, this question is kind of for you, that as we're thinking about these sort of democratization of data science and, hey, we'll just provide you with the commodity version of this, you don't need the internal expertise or you don't need the consultant. What are your thoughts in terms of, from a marketing analytics perspective, what do you think are the strengths and limitations of these kinds of automation strategies? And then kind of further, what are the implications for the role of the analyst? You know, once again, we're talking about the human in the loop.
Right, right. No, I mean, right off the bat, this will not replace analysts or the need for analysts, so we were all safe. But obviously there's a great time and place to use, you know, what did you call it? AI/ML or just AML?
Or just AutoML? Yeah.
Just AutoML, yeah. You know, you go to a lot of conferences, everyone's using this kind of lingo interchangeably, and everyone kind of means different things by it. But there's definitely places for this. You know, if you're looking specifically at your Google buys, or you're looking specifically at your Facebook buys, and you want to understand the probability of conversion, you want to understand what's the right placement, what's the right size of the ad, what are those things, that is a great place for AI. You don't need a whole lot of interpretation on the output of those results, right? You just it feeds on itself and it says, this is what your probability of conversion is, and you get a higher probability if you do this, right? The problem is that you can't rely on machine learning or any kind of auto solution when you're thinking about more holistic view of your marketing mix, right? If you're a marketer of a large brand and you've got $100 million to spend, you've got all of these outlets to spend it in, and not all of those outlets have, first of all, customer level data or user level data. So you can't do that kind of machine learning on those levels. And you also need to have an analysis that looks across all of that to understand truly what is the impact in the context of everything else that's going on in your business. And that's even outside of marketing, right? So you have to consider all the non-marketing factors. If you do, TV ads for ice cream in the summertime, you're going to look like your TV ads are fantastic. But if you don't take into consideration seasonality, right, you're going to be over-attributing a lot of those sales to your TV and not have accounted for all of the the non-marketing effects. So you still need to have a very large view of the business, holistic view of the business across those tactics, and you need to have people and analysts who understand the role of those tactics, as well as what other considerations would have an influence on your business to account for in these models. So there's still a lot of art to the science, but once you get that complete view, and for example, well, Facebook actually, within the realm of my entire mix, gives me a dollar return on ROI, then I know I can start diving into Facebook to further optimize it, and you can use machine learning there. So it is very good for specific one-off type of analyses, but to be able to tie everything together, you still really need a true analyst and a consultant who understands the different dynamics of the business to make good decisions on the incremental return on your investment.
Great. So it sounds like we're coming back to, once again, another situation where it's really going to be augmentation, perhaps, more so than the automation, right? And allowing the analysts to focus on the even more value-add activities.
Yeah.
Good. A lot happening. We've talked about automation, we've talked about disruption, and so I see a lot of young people in the room, and by young I mean under the age of 50, and so everyone's very young here. Jade, you are a successful rising star in the analytics space, and I can objectively say that as one of your former professors. And so what advice would you give to young people in the audience, in terms of the skill set? You talked about education needs, but for you, even in the last 4 or 5 years, and as you look at the next 5 years, are there things that you're saying, my goodness, there's soft and hard skills that are critical to be successful?
Absolutely. I mean, I think talking to people who are, undergrads looking to move into an industry like this, I noticed that people are super focused on what tool do I need to learn? Where do I need to focus my energy? Should I be learning Python? Should I focus on R? And I honestly think that, get to a point where you feel comfortable in your technical skills, get to a point where, you have some literacy there. But what's more important to me and has become more important throughout my career is being able to know, how to interpret the results. How do you look at data? What are the right questions to ask? How do you, reduce bias in what you're doing? And when do you ask yourself these questions? As well as how do you communicate your results? Too often you're working with someone who is very technically skilled and can do a great analysis, but unfortunately can't communicate their results in a way that resonates with business leaders. And that's so important, is being able to say, what they need to know when they need to know it. And we spend so much of our time as data scientists going through this, analysis process. And so in our minds, that's so important. But really, business leaders want to know the bottom line. Lead with that, and then fill in the gaps with the rest.
Great. No, I think that's great advice for everyone, all the young people in this room, including myself. And so I just have one more question, and this is a really important one. This is one that in academia, Raj and I are on many committees where we talk about this, and this is really the importance of greater inclusion of women and minorities in STEM fields, right? And this is something that's absolutely essential to the success and for us to create a vibrant discipline that is as effective as it can be, as fair and really innovating. And so the importance of this in data science cannot be overstated, right? And so we happen to have a couple of panelists here from Analytic Partners, which is a women-owned business, and it's been a very successful women-owned business where very fast-paced, significant growth, but at the same time, they have emphasized diversity, inclusion, empowering employees. And so I feel like this is an opportunity for us to ask them, what are the factors that have allowed your organization to be so successful? And as academics, as we're on the heels of this new School of Data Science and running analytics programs, what are some takeaways you might have from your experience at Analytic Partners that we can incorporate at UVA?
I can start. At first, it starts, as you mentioned, it is a woman-owned company. Nancy Smith, our president and CEO, started this company 20 years ago out of her home. And she was on the client side and started and recognized a need where she couldn't find a partner that was a true consultant that would truly partner with her and bring not only just knowledge of methodologies, but bring in, benchmarking and insights and knowledge and expertise that would help guide her. So she decided to start it herself and really grew out the company organically from there. And I think part of the success is, of course, she's a brilliant businesswoman and has been agile along the way, with every step of the way. And then she's developed a leadership team that also is diverse. I think it really does start at the top in hiring for, a diverse group of folks that are going to be leading the company, because just inherently that will then trickle down throughout the organization. So I do think that's the first step in becoming a successful and diverse company.
Yeah, I agree. I think with this part of culture, it definitely starts at the top. You can't rely on, new people in your company to establish the culture of diversity and inclusion. Because ultimately, employees in a company or in an organization need to see that example starting at the top, so that they feel like there is a place where they can thrive and where their contributions are mattering. And that's, first and foremost the most important thing before then they can continue to pass that on as they grow, through the organization, and as the organization continues to expand. So I think representation, the importance of that cannot be, overstated. So not just at the C level, but also at, the director level and like the people leaders, or like a professor in the case of academia. Just seeing that example of where women and people of minorities and other diverse backgrounds are, becoming successful is a great, example for others to strive for.
And it happens on your day-to-day too. So, if the company is focused around a goal altogether, like that's what becomes important. And everybody's idea, if it's a good one, like gets promoted up, and making sure that you give credit where credit is due. Who came up with that idea, and give them the reins to drive it to see it through, I think is also important.
Right, Ronald, thank you for that. I think there's a lot of important lessons there, and from a mindfulness standpoint, it seems like it starts with that as well, and starts at the top. Yep. I appreciate that. So folks, on that note, I'd like to open it up for audience questions. We've tried to talk about some interesting themes with AI and automation. We've talked about the talent aspect, but really, we'll open it up for any questions you might have for our panel at this point. Yes.
So from a risk management perspective, business analytics is contributing more and more to businesses' bottom lines and objectives. What, if anything, is being done to protect your efforts from things like hijacking by botnets, or the example that I was reading about the other day was folks using YouTube's recommendation algorithm to recommend political videos on non-political things. Are there any measures that you're taking or seen taking to protect these efforts?
You go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
It's not an easy question.
It
So
is.
it's like,
No.
Really good question.
Whether it falls on the government or it falls on the onus of the companies themselves is still yet to be determined. But certainly there are the digital buying agencies out there that are being held accountable more and more by the people who are paying them to be able to track back and report back what's been delivered. And I think the more that the clients who are paying these agencies to execute, the more they hold them accountable for tracking, I think will be better. It's been a while, but Procter & Gamble basically told all of their agencies, like, we're not going to work with you anymore unless you are able to report back to us on a monthly basis, like how much is being delivered. You put in the parameters to track it, and then report back to us how much is being delivered versus how much is being, how much is fraud, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's not botnets, but if you look at like GDPR can actually help, because the onus, you need to know what goes into the model, which means explainable AI is going to pick up, because that is coming and it's already there. So I think if that happens, right, if that works out more and more, then the need for transparency is going to grow, right? So some of the regulation like California law and GDPR can help in that regard, right, in terms of, because these things happen if there is less transparency. So the more you can make it transparent in terms of what data goes in, these things can be better protected.
And I'd like to just add one thing to that real quick. And again, we're chairing I do a lot of work in security, cybersecurity analytics, and your point's well taken. I will say this, and you guys will probably agree, that you started with the bottom line aspect, and so the pace of advancement for machine learning, analytics, AI on business-oriented apps, so the revenue-generating aspects has traditionally exceeded the state of innovation on the security side, which was traditionally viewed more, even though the risk aspect now is the economics of cybersecurity is becoming to light and driving the bottom line a little bit more. That is shifting a little bit. But in general, and also there's a talent aspect to consider here. The reality is that the cutting edge data science talent is tending to gravitate more towards the revenue-oriented aspects. And you see this happening in large tech companies. And I send students to security teams at the FANG companies and also the revenue side. And there is a little bit of a disparity. The bar is a little bit higher to get in on the revenue-oriented aspects of AI machine learning. So there is a little bit of a disparity that we need to think about. Great point.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Yes, Jason.
Can I ask two?
Absolutely. And first should be recognized. Thank you, Jason, Oracle Research, for your sponsorship. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay.
That's fantastic. Thanks, y'all. Thank you all for these great questions. I have a tactical question I want to direct towards Kristen. And speaking from a corporate, and you mentioned, like agency buying. And a lot of the model, I don't know how many corporates are here, but in that agency model, you tend to have to contract with these people. And then you're going to do a big fat ad buy. And you're like, okay, here are the things that I care about. And I would submit that maybe a lot of these agencies don't have the data acumen that you're referring to. So how do you guys work in those kinds of confines, or how would you even advise someone who's saying, hey, the agency's not thinking that way. I hate to look back and go, oh, you did all this wrong. So I guess the question is, how do you guys recommend engaging, so it's a very tactical question, with people like me who are at a big corporate that are being told, here's the agency buy that you have to do? And then I'll come up with my second unrelated question.
No, it's a great question. So, just Analytic Partners is a independent company. We are not data providers. We are solely an analytics engine that we work with our clients to provide robust insights for competitive advantage and bottom line results. So, just roll off the tongue there. So when we work with our clients, and we have very long-term partnerships, partly because we are a privately held company. We don't, we have a long-term view with our clients, and in doing that, we have a very strong relationship with them. And if they are looking to go into a new area, or they're looking to work with a new agency, we tell them right up front, make sure that you include in your contracts that you're going to have, this amount of data accessible to you as well as to third parties to do the analytics. So it's very important that on the onset of working with agencies, they build into their contracts, that you build into your contracts, that they will be tracking the data, that you have done your due diligence and how they're going to track their data, and that they're going to be able to provide it to you at the level of granularity that you're looking to have it. And then we partner very closely with not only our clients, but our clients' agencies. So when we... Yeah, exactly. We see it somewhat of a triangle. So when we have meetings, the agency partners are included as well from the onset, from the kickoff of an analysis, to make sure that we all understand the data that we're trying to collect. We collect all the data, we process it, we actually kind of summarize it, and we provide back a summary of the data that was collected before we even do the analytics to say, here's what we have, does it look accurate, does it look comprehensive, before we even get into the modeling. And so the agency partners are very involved in that process. And then we kind of go off and do our own thing, right? And we crunch the numbers and we start putting those puzzle pieces together. And then when we come back out with the insights and the results, again, not only with our clients, but our clients' agencies are involved in the delivery of those insights, and then, of course, the optimization implementation of them.
Can I just add on to that? So I can think of a couple examples just within the last year of working directly with agencies where the client is asking us to answer a business question, right? And we're collecting the data from the agencies. It's coming back to us, and we're seeing that it's really not robust. It's not going to work to answer this question. And since then have worked very closely with multiple different agencies to actually help them to understand, here's what we need to be able to answer this question. We know this is important to our client and to their client as well, and working with them to actually update like their data practices to be able to collect and summarize data back to us, which will then be usable in the future. So that's a very topical example of how we've put time against working directly with agencies to improve our analyses for our clients.
That's super helpful. and we'll probably have more conversation after this. But I'll make the second question really fast. This one's for Jade. I want to flip around what he asked you, because I appreciate what you're saying. In fact, I talked to one of your classmates yesterday who's kind of going through this career change and going into technology. So the question was, what would you advise students, what would you, right? I think I want to flip that around, is because there's a lot of educators in here too. How should educators, because this is of interest to Oracle and kind of what we need to be thinking about coming alongside, I feel like Professor Bassi, what would you advise educators to help enable new and young students coming out, so that when they come in there, which I loved, what I heard in your answer was like learning how to learn technology, maybe not necessarily that particular technology. So what would you advise, what might have been deficient and what your experience was?
Yeah, I think McIntyre actually does a really good job of, and I'm not sure how it's changed over the years, but of not getting too much in the weeds, technically speaking. Like I remember when I was in Abbasi's class, like we used some open source software, I forget what it's called now, but basically learning, what's going on in the analysis beyond just the interface or beyond just, how to execute the analysis. So I felt like in my experience, there wasn't, a ton of emphasis on writing code or like that very technical aspect of what we're talking about, and more so emphasis on, okay, how do you choose the right type of analysis to answer this question, and how do you answer the questions that are being asked of you and that you're asking to the data. So I think the more emphasis that's placed on like the impact of what you're doing, and being able to track back to what is the best way to achieve that impact is a good way to go about it.
Yes, and so let's wait for the mic to come over to. We need an optimization algorithm. That's not optimization.
Hi, thanks for coming down. The presentation, the keynote this morning talked a lot about open source, and made a really strong narrative for that. What percentage of the tools you use would you say are open source now, and how impactful has that been?
Good question.
So, R is open source, and so a lot of people use that, and I think, but when you go into, more and more, right? it's hard to put a percent in terms of we don't have a survey data to tell us how much is used,
Are you
right?
stack? Do you start out on Linux? Are you running Windows for your OS? Just curious.
No, and I can speak from what we use as faculty and staff as well as what we teach. So I can speak to that, and both pretty confidently for McIntyre and Darden. It varies. So we tend to, very consulting of me, right? It depends. But basically, I would say still very much, we tend to be a Microsoft stack, at least at McIntyre, and I believe Darden's the same way on the technology side for supporting faculty and staff. We do have some power users who are the really technical folks that have Linux installations, or we have Mac users and so forth. From what we teach, it's increasingly shifted from, we used to be SAS and SPSS shops with significantly large multi-year engagements with those types of organizations, right? We still do have licenses we do use some of that. I think the vast majority of what we're teaching is R, Python. The big data stack is entirely open source, and that's driven a lot of it. We are much more MySQL, Postgre versus SQL Server type. It's very much open source, and that's also impacted the type of faculty we have to recruit, because obviously the maintenance, the life cycle for class management has been impacted by it as well. And it's also impacted how we teach, though, because sometimes the usability is not, and the quality of service is not quite as good, but we have to do it because that's where the world is heading. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, we use Microsoft products at Analytic Partners, most businesses do. It's kind of interesting because you do get a lot of graduates coming out of college and not really knowing how to use Microsoft. They've all been on Apples. So it's been a little interesting. But yeah, it's evolved. You know, we used to use SPSS when we started off. We do have some proprietary software that we built in-house on top of Python, I think is what the background is there. But then, you know, we do other ad hoc analyses, custom analyses where we use R or Python. We use a lot of SQL to do our data manipulation. So, yeah, I think to Jade's point, as long as you can know one language, you know, you can apply it pretty much anywhere else and pick up pretty quickly.
So my confusion was more on like, there is the analysis side, but there's also the software on the capture of data side in terms of, and also when we talked about the walled gardens of where you place the ads, right? And so most of that is proprietary, right? And it's not open source. And so Adobe is picking up a lot. I've heard many people talk about Adobe to get and capture all the data across like Google, Facebook, and such. And so that is proprietary, but it has some basic analytics functions in it as well, right? So you have like companies in marketing functions use some of that, right? And then you got like the database providers keep adding analytics on top of the database, right? And then that will probably interface into a R or a Python, right? So it's a hybrid model over there, right? So and R also has an enterprise version, so nothing is really fully open source anymore, right? So because if you go into scalable models, you got to pay for it and it becomes proprietary. So I think a lot of development is happening open source, but the model is open source first, and then we start building a business around it.
And I think the keynote this morning touched upon this, but I run a center for business analytics. We work with about 20 companies, and they're driving some of what we do because it's sort of the chicken and the egg model. The economics around service level agreements is a really important thing that cannot be overstated, where as companies are using analytics more and more and more, in order to improve the ROI, the margins, the open source without those SLAs around usage are really, really a big driver. So if you're trying to compete on analytics and really a business process improvement, that's a big, big driver of it as well.
Yeah, and I don't know a whole lot about that, but I know that we as a company have spent a lot of time this past year becoming SOC 2 compliant, which I think is somewhat related to what you're saying here. Yeah. And so, you know, that's really important for our clients. There's several clients out there that will not work with companies unless they are, because security is becoming such a big issue.
Great question, thank you.
I've got another question.
Oh, we've got one over here, yeah.
Hi. So my question was kind of, where does business intelligence kind of end and data science start as applied to business analytics? And is that a fine line, or is it a large gray space?
So it's a data capture and then data analysis division, right? And if you think about like the way, in my view, because names get used differently in different places, the way I see it is you have like what Davenport had, like the descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. And I think a lot of business intelligence with the automated reports is descriptive because you're looking at what happened in the past, right? And predictive is where data science starts, where you're trying to predict what will happen. And prescriptive is where you look at why something is happening. So I think the what will happen and why parts are where data science comes in. And a lot of it, And I think in marketing, it's a lot more on the why part as to we need to know why something is happening more than like predicting what the inventory needs are in the next month, right? So I think a lot more data science now is in this, like if you take neural nets and lasso regressions and those kind of things, they're like purely in the predictive side. If you're going into binomial logit regressions and cluster analysis, those all go into the prescriptive side, right? So that will be like where I think most of data science is, and the descriptive side is where most of the business intelligence would be. You had the question? Go ahead.
Have any of you looked at business process automation, like automating desktop analysis, stuff like that? There's a whole science field about that. I mean, I don't know if you use that for any of your data mining process or anything like that.
Can you give an example? I'm not sure if I'm
Sure. Yeah. We got involved in controlling a microscope, for instance, proprietary software that we needed to kind of micromanage, literally. And so we were having this screen capture tool control the software and then take the feedback from that, do image processing on it. And so we had two proprietary softwares. They were both just garbage. There's no way to interface with them, so we were doing it with kind of an automation layer on top of it. It was really interesting. I didn't know if you've looked at any business process automation tools. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. I know a couple. Just curious.
I can. Do you want me to? Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And so when we look at the automation side, I think what you're talking about at the basic level connects with RPA, right? So there's robotic process automation, and this can be as simple as Excel macros, right? So literally in my spreadsheet, if I'm doing something super structured, we can automate that and save carpal tunnel as well as labor cost, right? But then from there, the question becomes, how do you go from that basic level to the more machine learning AI? Because there isn't any, to be honest. It's very rule-based if you have something super structured. And there's a lot of frameworks around this. And one thing to think about is, as you're thinking about automation with decision making, there's people that have looked at it from the classic OODA loop perspective, which I think a lot of us are familiar with. OODA is observe, orient, decide, and act. And the idea is that your RPA can help with observe and orient, but the decide and act is now going to be the person in the loop, and you're just freeing them up to do that better. Where it gets really interesting is how AI and machine learning can help with those things later on, both the observe and orient, where they're non-trivial, where they're semi-structured, or there's a non-linear decision boundaries or whatnot, and then also the full automation. So that's the augmentation, and then the full automation is the decide and act also getting with machine learning. And that's where even some of what we talked about with AutoML. So AutoML, the idea is that, you guys are familiar with CRISP-DM, Cross-Industry Standard Process for Data Mining. It's basically your business understanding, data preparation, modeling, evaluation. Well, instead of having a data scientist do that, they're saying, we'll add a layer of machine learning on top of it and treat it as an optimization problem. If we have a structured set of KPIs, key performance indicators, let's just use machine learning to learn that. So that's an example of taking something that's much more advanced and trying to use genetic algorithms or these methods to optimize the learning of the learning process, right? And that's what Google and Microsoft are pitching as their AutoML packages for churn prediction, something that's a pretty structured task. So that's where it gets interesting. So there's this whole spectrum. We're seeing RPA used a lot in the federal government and as well as in the private sector, where we see augmented ML is kind of what's happening, but the question becomes, will AutoML happen, right? And how will it happen? So that's sort of the debate. Yeah.
So I can give two examples of automation, right, which uses analytics. So programmatic advertising. So whenever you land on a website, any display ad you see is fully automated, right? It's in nanoseconds, and there is a whole ad exchange, and there are layers upon layers of automation before these. So there's a brand, and then you have somebody who decides what is happening, and then you have then you have an analytics platform. Then you have the exchange for display ads, and within that you then have the website, and then you see the ad, and all of that is in nanoseconds, right? So you have like multiple layers. So programmatic is one. Another example which we all know is recommendation engines. So anytime you're on Netflix or on Amazon, all the recommendations that you're getting is automated, right? So that's all like analytics that is running, which is automated.
So I'm curious, I'm just for the audience, like just for those of you from industry, how do we have folks that feel like they're, like in terms of, we talk a lot about capability maturity around analytics and machine learning. How many of you feel like you're in an earlier stage in your organizations, whether you're at an academic unit or in a, in the private sector? How many of you feel like you're still kind of figuring it out? You're doing basic business intelligence, reporting. So I saw a couple of hands up. How many of you feel like you're a little bit more intermediate? You're starting to use a little bit more machine learning models, maybe better forecasting, clustering, segmentation? So I think I saw a few people there. Do we have any others that are in the super kind of more advanced category where you think you're using a lot more AI? Oh, the people near the front, you guys, right? Super advanced. Very cool. It's okay, you just got to own it. You got to be like, yes, that's us. Very good, very good. So I guess I'm just curious, those of you that are in the earlier stages, what are some of the challenges that you have, and how do you think the data and business analytics intersection can help with that, if at all? Is it relevant to this? And yeah, please.
I think it has the potential to be super relevant. You've got a lot of the management is coming at it from an older model because data science is such a new field. It's hard to point to where it's going to impact their bottom line until they've implemented in that industry. I work in government and telecommunications, and while we've got a lot of good technology that we're stewards of and that we're putting in place, we're not putting a lot of intelligence in the way we do our business because it's a big old business.
Interesting. So you mentioned the size aspect too, so change management and other things are part of it, agility and so forth. Yes, and you had raised your hand as well.
Yeah, I was going to say in our business, which is Massanutten Resort, we've started doing.
And the microphone is right behind you now, if you'd like. Sorry.
We've started business intelligence, doing more advanced reporting, data models, and Power BI, and the data actually instigates more questions than answers. Okay, so I think the management gets very wide-eyed. There's how many opportunities? Let's look at this, and my challenge right now is that the data isn't necessarily there to answer all the questions. So how do you go back and loop back to the beginning and say, we have to set up the process to collect the data that you want to see on the back end. And like I said, more data, more questions from where we are at least.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to give you some reassurance that you're not alone. The largest of large hospitality companies are struggling with the same thing. So you can share that with your leadership.
Interesting size. And then I think I saw a hand up for like intermediate. And Jason, that might have been you. So for you guys, some things are clearly working well. You've moved the needle.
Yeah, it's ironic because we make ML stuff, right? So like we consume our own, like our database stuff is all fully automated, self-driving. We don't tune databases anymore or any of that. But like in the business practicality, we have different levels of the maturity. So in our space, we care about Oracle for research, which is not an automated kind of thing. But the other side is startups. So we work with tons and tons of startups. So when a startup comes into the family, I don't know anything about them. So what we're trying to do is get to a point that predicts how well they'll be in our program. We don't have to worry about what that means here. But so I would say we're in the middle of that to where I think we're probably 3 or 4 months away from having a pretty confident prediction based on certain behaviors. And then where the magic is trying to get to is then what levers do we think we can do, and then eventually automatically to influence and increase their probability of goodness going through that. So the interesting thing is what you just touched on is the top have to buy into it, and if they don't, then you just need to kind of go like try stuff behind the scenes and then go, hey, this works. And so that's kind of, it's a mixture of, we've had both. We've had both. So intermediate and with aspirations would be the answer. But,
Okay, okay. And I would be remiss if we didn't also hear from our super advanced, amazing, cutting-edge users who are. You guys should have been sitting up here. I think that was the whole plan, right? And I'm sorry, I missed the cue.
Yeah, sorry. No, I mean, I think it's a spectrum, number one, right? I don't think you're ever going to be super advanced. I think so we're with S&P Global. So we have some areas where we are super advanced. And a lot of that, if you saw the previous session, comes from the combination of really smart technologists and then also really good, rich input data. And we've created some processes that are outperforming the major players in the market when we've sort of compared them side by side. So there are places where we're very advanced. The other places in our operations as well, I mean, we've been doing BI and analytics on our operations for years now. We have a very advanced sort of program around that. But then there are areas where, some of our commercial teams, don't tell them I said this, but they're still putting stuff together around compensation, that's coming out of lots and lots of spreadsheets and trying to figure that out. So, it is a spectrum. I think we're somewhere in there, but there are areas where we feel pretty confident that we pushed the bar pretty far.
Excellent, excellent. And you'll be pleased to know that our streaming is delayed by a few seconds, so they will not have found out till now, what you just said. All right. So last thing I want to leave you guys with is, we talked about business data science, and yes, a lot of it is about, the natural thing to talk about is how do you monetize data, drive insights in business settings, but really, business data science is also ultimately about organizations. And so the reason I wanted to end with this capability maturity stuff was that this is also a really good intersection to think about what are the factors that help organizations, irrespective of whether you're public or private or nonprofit sector, get from where you are to where you want to go in terms of your roadmap. And a lot of the things we heard about were process, culture, change management, people. Yeah, technology, but that's usually technology is often not the biggest driver here. And so that's also an interesting intersection where business data science probably has a lot to offer, just because you have a lot of researchers and a lot of industry folks who are accustomed to working in organizational units to drive things, drive change, right? And so that's something I want to leave you with as well. I also want to make sure to thank our panelists for being here with us today. Thank you all so much. Let's give them a round, folks.